All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. We'll just go ahead and get started as people continue to trickle in. We have a reduced number of experts on this call, so I was just making the plug that, I think a lot of you guys in the audience, I know that you are experts, even if you're not our supposed experts today. So feel free to jump in and have it just be a super informal conversation. There's Juliana. Hello, welcome.
So I was just trying to eat my lunch really fast because I've had back-to-back meetings. So
Oh, geez. I
yeah,
hear
no
you
worries.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries at all. No problem. Yeah, I was just saying we're keeping it super informal today. So you are one of our experts and we want to, get your perspective, but we also don't want to put too much pressure on you. So, a lot of contributions from the audience. So just to set the scene for you all, Monique was just saying there's been a lot of buzz around this conversation, this topic of pink insecticides this year. This is one of three conversations on this topic that I'm hosting this winter. So I think why is that? I think a lot of it has to do with both regulatory concerns, but also, well, different kinds of, so pesticides being restricted, but then also marketing regulations that are removing some of those pink insecticides. And then also just sort of a question of what's going on there. So I know you guys all know the historical context better than I do, but I feel like when I started 7 years ago, we were sort of in this transition where historically everybody sprayed a pink spray. Artignello, and I'm guessing a bunch of you guys sort of pushed moving away from that pink spray because it seemed less necessary. And now some of the growers are approaching me saying, we're worried about potential knock-on effects if we don't do that pink spray. So I think that's like a big part of the question is how can we use reduced risk or any sort of products that are saving our natural enemies in the early season and like the pink petal fall timing and also our pollinators, obviously. But we still need to manage some of those tricky pests. A big one that comes up with my growers is plum curculio. Um, aphids, well, the apple aphid is another one that there's a lot of hype around recently. So I don't know if Monique and Juliana, if you want to just start off the conversation with some thoughts on the topic, or if you had slides, that's great, but I told you don't bother, so I'm guessing you don't.
You want to go first or you want me to go first?
No, you go first, Monique.
Um, okay, so I think the lens that I've been thinking about this in has really been through the lens of woolly apple aphid. Plum curculio seems like a more difficult thing to manage without insecticides, although I think there's a lot of different techniques being utilized. And we have Jaime Pinero on the call, and I would consider him to be one of the experts on managing plum curculio in more sustainable ways. It doesn't mean just spraying a pyrethroid during bloom. So what we've noticed with woolly apple aphid, because that's the lens I'm working with in New York, this has been a bang up problem. It's just something that when it gets out of control, it gets very far out of control, and we don't have a lot of good recommendations. So what we found is that different pyrethroids work differentially to flare woolly apple aphid, and we think this has to do with the impact on the natural enemy. And specifically, what we're talking about here is Aphelinus malai, but it could be all of them. We have not done the research to figure that out. All we have done is really kind of shown with 1 year of data, and we're hoping to do it for a second year to confirm is that different pyrethroids work differentially to flare them. So specifically what we've found is that Mustang Max and Brigade 2 EC are the two that appear to flare woolly apple aphid the most. And so we have recommended growers stay away from those products. Um, Other than that, I've seen that through that lens because we're really trying to work on woolies. With woolies, one thing that we have seen that's worked, but also can be, pretty broad spectrum, would be a steam. So using that at the half-inch green mark, and then following up with a product like Senstar at Petal-Fall. So we're not really in that pink timeline. But so that's an insect growth regulator and it can affect natural enemies. But one thing to note also about natural enemies is sometimes you can manipulate their access to them by changing the time of day. So generally they're entering and exiting the field in ideal conditions, similar to pollinators. Not always, but when they're the most active is similar to around the time when you would see pollinators active when the weather is nicer. Now that I'm not really talking about cold weather pollinators like bumblebees, they tend to fall outside of that range. But, trying to get a spray on really, really, really early in the day before you see insects buzzing about is a decent recommendation that we're also using in citrus in California. Same thing with like later evening sprays. Now that's not always doable. I think in terms of other recommendations is that, one thing that comes up all the time is tarnished plant bug. And really feel that tarnished plant bug is something that is more of a weed management issue. So removing the broadleaf weeds outside of your normal herbicide season. So, one thing that I hear a lot from growers is 2,4-D, like getting solid applications of 2,4-D down in the fall and trying to really get rid of your broadleaf weeds is something that can really keep the pressure of tarnished plant bug down in an orchard. That being said, some people just don't do that and they're very reactive to the presence of tarnished plant bug because you can get significant damage. Like I said in the beginning, I really do think that when it comes to pink, the thing of major concern is plum curculio, and that varies year to year whether you're really looking for that at pink. Last year, they had a really tough time in the Hudson Valley because it stayed a little bit cooler for longer. We had rainy periods, and so that season just got really extended compared to how we normally consider it. So there is a degree day model for plum curculio. I would highly recommend thinking about implementing that into your strategy to limit excess sprays. But if the season goes like last season in the Hudson Valley and you have an extended period, there's not much advice I can give other than to make sure you're rotating your product. So that's pretty much all I have is like a standard, you know, just giving you what I think about early season sprays. And so I'll pass to Juliana, who's excited to follow up on that.
Yeah, Juliana, one thing that's exciting to me about you being on this call is sometimes I kind of get siloed in my New York bubble where the New York issues are the ones that I'm thinking about, and I actually don't even know. Is this something that's on growers' kind of peripheral vision in Michigan? Are you guys using pink sprays? What's going on over there?
So I guess I first wanted to define how we use pink spray in Michigan versus how it kind of sounds like. So pink spray for us is really before bloom, right? And so the traditional target for that in Michigan here was for rosy apple aphids, whether they had them or not, and trunk borers. So like that, those would be the two reasons why people were applying pink sprays, or that for that timing. But then for plum curculio in Michigan anyway, Petal-Fall is like the main timing for trying to control plum curculio, and that can sometimes overlap with like tag blooms and some pollinator activity that's going on in the orchard. And what we're seeing more recently is just that we get warmer. We're getting like these cold periods where like nothing happened, like so warm and cold periods like sort of fluctuating in spring that just make it difficult to predict how long something is actually active and whether we're using the right materials against it. So plum curculio is a good case of that. Like they start to be active, but then if we get a cold spell, then they sit there. But if it's been warm for a while, then so it's all that is to say we don't have the materials anymore, like anyway, to like just do like nuke. We can't nuke the orchard like we used to, and that is not a bad thing, but it's just made it a lot trickier to like handle something like plum curculio, which is a tank of an insect. So I would say that, I think most commercial growers still are applying some kind of a pink spray as a preventative against rosy apple aphids, which is our earliest aphid. We don't really start to see woolly apple aphids until June. They're above ground and on the tree. And Martine, who's on the call here, I see him. He's been doing the work in my lab on where they are like on the tree and at different time periods. And so they're overwintering above ground. I think that's probably part of the issue of why they've become more abundant. Um, and so they can like just get going a lot faster. They're already above ground, but there's a lot. The crawlers are moving it above, going up and down the tree like all season long. So I think we've had trouble trying to fit in like what's the best timing for like an insect growth regulator against that particular pest, just because there's a lot of overlapping generations, and so it yeah, I don't have easy answers for aphids. There's not a lot of materials. We just had Rebecca Schmidt Jeffress here doing a seminar in our department, and they have a lot of organic production, apple production, especially out west, and their biggest struggle is with aphids, and there's not really a lot of options for soft materials that work against aphids. So the newest material is Bronte, and we're still trying to wrap our brain around like how well does it work against aphids, but that's a softer material and I don't know that it's worked very well against Plum curculeo. Plum curculeo is a tank, it's really hard. So yeah, I feel like I'm saying I'm helping, like not at all. So, but like basically those are our challenges in the spring here in Michigan for the most part. My technician Heather Leach is on here too. I don't know if she's had a lot of like direct experience on farm with trying to manage these on scale, right? On a larger scale. So I don't know if I'm happy to have Martine or Heather hop in here if they have anything they want to add, but
Yeah, absolutely. Let's have them
yeah.
hop in. I just want to say in response to that, Juliana, that
Mm-hmm.
this this webinar series started off as stupid questions. And then at some point we realized that all the questions that we were getting were like ridiculously difficult questions with absolutely no answer. So this
Yeah.
is par for the course with these conversations. That's kind of the point, is these are conversations that we've all been walking in circles around, and we're trying to figure out together how to move
Before,
forward.
yeah, well, good point. But I also, it just occurred to me, like the biological control aspect is very important, and Monique brought that up already. And just we know in orchards where we have strong evidence of natural enemy abundance, we don't get woolly apple aphid problems. The rosies may flare up and then they disappear pretty readily afterwards. So like, was it ever even necessary to do the pink spray? Like how much damage are we getting? But plum curculeo, we don't struggle with that in apples very much. It's really more of a problem in cherries for us, and also in peaches, of course. And I don't know if that's just because they're still using materials that are on the harsher side of things for that, but yeah, it's hard for us to get actually field sites to do research on plum curculeo in apple in Michigan. So yeah, so that's all I have to say about that. Yeah, Terrence.
Yeah, I was just I'm taking notes along here and all the discussion around aphids. I've always said aphids, and I get it. We have complicated complexes to manage, and we have spraying materials that are from multiple different generations, including stuff we've been using for 70 years. But I've always said aphids to me are a sign that something's out of whack, similar to mites, right? And I'm hoping, and I get it, like this might be a little bit too Pollyanna-ish, and I know that there's growers that have flare-ups at times, but I'm hoping we can get to a space where seeing aphids is an indicator to us to keep an eye out for predators, and then come back in a week or two and find the aphids that have been killed. And I see this all the time in our orchard. I manage our orchard, and we haven't used a pyrethroid in a couple decades. Granted, our orchard, it's the university orchard, 4 or 5 acres, and does not have the same commercial pressures and standards that commercial growers have. But once in my life have I ever sprayed for aphids, and I've managed commercial farms before, and it's one of these things. I think that we still sometimes fall back on this old habit of We see the bugs and we got to manage the bugs. Whereas sometimes if we give it a little bit of a breathing room, something's going to come eat those, especially aphids. They're a buffet for so many things. Now that doesn't mean young plantings you don't stunt them with with some serious aphid damage, but I think that's a little bit of a paradigm shift that IPM was supposed to kind of force us to adopt. Yeah, I say the same thing about tarnished plant bug in terms of the shift in Vermont from a wholesale industry to a pick your own retail industry. My growers, I tell them all the time, unless you're putting your apple on a truck, ignore tarnished plant bug. But right across the lake, where all those apples go on a truck to a grocery store, the tarnished plant bug matters. So yeah, I guess this comes back to sort of tolerance and your tolerance for what's out there, and maybe how much comfort you have to step back for a minute and let things ride out. I've seen a few people popped on camera, so I'm gonna shut off my mic and let folks throw bombs at me.
Yeah, I'll throw a little bit of a bomb, Terry, because I got completely blindsided by rosy apple aphid a couple of years ago. And something I've never really bothered much about. They're very variety specific, so they go for certain things. A lot of probably Cortland being the most common thing that people grow. It seemed like there was at least one strain of Honeycrisp that they were going after. And it just, I've never seen anything like the kind of population that just erupted, about 3 or 4 years ago, I think. Because I'd kind of gotten to the point of, yeah, we see a little fruit injury, but it's pretty tolerable. And, if people are using neonics for other purposes, they're usually hitting the rosy aphids. But that kind of startled me. I've heard people say, and this maybe relates to the tarnished plant bug issue with weed management that somebody else brought up, that I think plantain is an alternate host for rosy aphid, so maybe that makes a difference.
Did you want to jump in, Jaime? I saw you were
Yeah,
unmuted.
I was showing face because with aphids, we almost don't have problems in Massachusetts. Even if growers find the aphids on trees, they know they can disappear in a week, natural enemies, for example. So they're not spraying against aphids. European apple softfly, it could be a couple of orchards. It depends on what I find difficult is to monitor for European apple softfly. And when regarding sprays at the pink stage, I just don't know any grower who applies any insecticides at pink other than the oils, for example. So that's a different story. But the insecticides, no, I don't think there is growers in spraying at pink. Then pyrethroids, to my knowledge, maybe 1 in 25 may spray pyrethroids, but it's just almost not used in apple. Now with plum curculio, there is a list that I have, which I would like to share with you, if you don't mind. Every year, I need to send a request to share, if that's possible. Because every year I update a table, which I discuss with growers, and I send to in Healthy Fruit. This table is updated every year, and it's just trying to show what are the most effective materials. The focus is plum curculio. That's why you see in yellow with the orange box, the red box. But what else can you control at Petal-Fall with the same materials? So I'm not saying I'm not including anything that is moderate, it's in red, but like a low efficacy is not there. So if you want to control plum curculio, for example, and you also want to control oriental fruit moth and oblique banded, etc., well, you can pick from here. What I have been recommending and testing, and I don't have any examples of bad efficacy or low efficacy, is let me find it. Is Verde Pring. It's at the bottom. It's Verde Pring. It's a diamide. Why I became interested in Verde Pring? I was interested in it for a number of reasons. Number one, as you know, some of the diamides, they provide very good rain fast, and so the material goes into the leaves, and it's not systemic, but it creates a reservoir. So I have been, it's too sad that this entomologist from Michigan State retired. What is his name? And the one that was working a lot with the rain fasting, John Weiss.
John Wise, yeah.
He retired. He was the best source to get information on the rain fasting properties. But basically, diamides is at the top when it comes to protecting the fruit against rainfall. Then you have carbamates and oxidazines and all of these materials. My whole point is that growers are still using imidan. Many of them are using Avant Evo, high efficacy against plum curculio, and that can provide also some control against other pests. I know it's too many materials. I'm even getting confused about what I'm talking about. But Exirel, even though it's also a diamide, seems to be less effective than Verdeprin. Back to Verdeprin, one more reason I found it interesting is when you have blocks and they bloom at different times because you have different cultivars. If you have a cultivar that it needs to be sprayed against plum curculio, Petal-Fall, but you have a few trees or some rows where you still have some bloom, what do you do? Do you spray only a few rows and then don't spray the one that has still some blooms? The label of Verdeprin tells you that you can apply at bloom. If you can apply at night, if you can reduce the rate, because the RT25 is the number of hours that the bees will be very sensitive to this. I think it's 8 hours. RT25, I think it's called. So that's why I have been recommending Verdeprin, because it has proven to be effective. It has better rain fast against rainfall, but it protects, stays longer. But also, if you have multiple cultivars and some of them are still in bloom, you can apply it. It's in the label, but you have to apply at night and you have to reduce the rate. Any comments or questions? I can continue. It's more expensive.
I had a real quick question, Jaime, just to clarify, because I don't see it on here. So what do H, G, and M mean?
Where is it?
So what you're rating.
Yeah,
sorry.
The H is high efficacy. The M is on top on the right, but maybe you cannot see it. High efficacy is in blue, H. M is a moderate efficacy, is in red. And you see an S.
I see G. I see G. That's the one I really don't know.
It's just good.
Okay.
I should have included on top. Good. There is a couple of S in black. That would be suppression.
Suppression. That one I can see,
according to the label. Yeah. And just like this, I made one table specific for the spotted wing Drosophila, just because it's more difficult to recommend, because it depends on the crop, it depends on other factors. So I have a different table. And there is one more table that I made, which is for summer sprays. You forget about all these insects and you only focus on stink bugs and apple maggot and others, which are not shown here. That's what I send to growers every year. And I try to discuss.
Yeah, so the diamides, so Alticor is a standard for like first generation codling moth here in Michigan, one of those standards, and a sale is the other. And so like Verdeprin, I mean, I don't know of any growers using Verdeprin at this timing or much at all. And they mostly complain about Exirel being too expensive. They're not likely to use it. I have no idea how much Verdeprin costs, but that's taking the economics into it is like really makes it even more challenging to like make recommendations.
Yeah, no, and I understand. What I found is that I think it's about $50 per acre for Verdeprin. But
what is it? $50?
It's like a $50 per
acre. Yeah.
Then when I talk to growers and if they're interested, what I'm trying to say is that when you combine all these qualities, I would say it's like a higher quality material.
Sure.
When you're really trying to kill plum curculio and you're trying to also take care of other insects, it has been working well, but it's just more expensive. I agree with you.
So maybe trying to like pull a few of these threads together. There was some questions or some comments in the chat that I want to highlight about European apple softfly And Mike mentioned that maybe it has to do with the cool extended bloom, and sort of looping back to that, I think maybe that'll also clarify a little bit of your question, Juliana, about Plum curculio as a pink spray. So yes, traditionally, I think that was considered a Petal-Fall spray. And I guess I didn't quite explain this, but some of my growers recently have been saying we get these ridiculous long, drawn out bloom periods. By the time the bees are gone, by the time they're able to come in with the Petal-Fall spray, it's kind of game over, and the plum curculio has already marked up all their fruit. And so that's where some of the growers, well, that's one of the reasons why some of the growers that I work with are saying, okay, we just need to get in there with a pink spray, get something on the fruit, some sort of protection. I don't even know if that's doing anything on plum curculio at that point because it's theoretically not out yet, but depends on the year, right? And then I agree, like something like European apple sawfly, it can be hard to manage it if we have this like drawn out bloom. If we had products that we could go in during bloom at night and spray, I don't know, does that make a difference? Is that a game changer? I'm not really sure about that. I don't know if I would personally, as an extension educator, feel very comfortable telling growers to spray during bloom no matter what, because I feel like then that becomes a slippery slope. Um,
Yeah.
Thoughts, feedback.
I don't know how practical, I guess, that advice even really is. I mean, just especially, well, I guess it depends on the size of the farm, but just like trying to get, I think the main concern in this early spring timing for Michigan really is about fungicide use, honestly. And so then you're fitting in an insecticide spray in one of your fungicide applications, but trying to like just maintain coverage against apple scab and potentially against fire blight. But like those are like, that is like what's driving the tractor, the sprayer is like the fungicide program here in Michigan, and maybe that's true for you as well. But I hear you. Like I think spring weather has just become more and more unpredictable and just harder to like deal with. I mean, wash off concerns and just like different. I mean, there's just like so many reasons why spring has become particularly challenging for pest management just across the board. So I had another thought, and I'm like, well, I guess I just wanted to say one thing about sawfly. We rarely see sawfly. It'll be in an orchard that is borderline neglected, or minimally nothing is really done in it. This is the only places I've ever heard of people complaining about it are like very small orchards near Detroit, around the Detroit area. Commercial farms are just like not, we'd never encounter sawfly. I don't even see sawfly at Trevor Nichols, which is our main fruit research station. We let that go. Like we have a lot of unsprayed blocks in there and we don't see sawfly. So this is interesting. I don't know if it's moving or shifting its range or what's happening with it, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it. My colleague Jackie Perkins has a little grant to like monitor for it this season, because we don't really usually monitor for it, just to see where it might be popping up. So yeah, there's some, I mean, I'm also interested in like the weird things that are popping up in like the midge. So in Ontario they like complain about this midge that I've never seen either, but like they have far fewer materials available to them, so they're already having like, they're being forced to use these softer programs and with interesting consequences. So I'm glad that we have we try to maintain a connection with our Amafra colleagues for that reason, really, to just learn from them. And I don't know if any of them are on this particular call. But
Looking, are there any Omafra folk on here?
oh, Justin Renkamut, you're from Ontario, right?
I was just going to comment about sawfly. The reason I brought it up was that we seem to have exported it from New England because it used to be a much worse problem here than it seems to be. But it presents a problem as far as predicting when it's going to happen. We used to put out, and I still try putting out a few visual traps, the white, blossom mimic traps at pink. But the trouble is, by the time they don't fly at pink, they fly during bloom. And so by the time you're actually seeing the sawflies on the trap, you're a little late for making an early decision. In the past, I think, the organophosphates would pretty much knock out the eggs that got laid. And, even if they went on at Petal-Fall, they'd still stop the problem. Carbaryl seems to do the same thing. So if people are using that as an early thinner, that seems to work. But I've seen situations where people did, we did no pre-bloom insecticide, and then they skipped the carbaryl because they weren't sure about fruit set, and we're using like a Sale or Avant, and they did not do anything for sawfly. It was appalling. And I also had a question when I was at the Cumberland Shenandoah meeting. I had mentioned about the parasite that Alan Eaton imported into New Hampshire. And there was some curiosity about whether we should follow up on that and see if that's actually become established in the years since then. That's been a while since that happened.
A parasite of
Seeing it.
Parasite of what? What's it a parasite of?
Of European apple sawfly.
Oh, okay.
There was a parasitic wasp released against. Yeah.
In terms of that midge, the apple leaf curling midge, I think that's a funny one. Like it kind of for a while it was just in Ontario. Mike put in the chat, and for a long time I had high populations over in Ontario and high populations over in Eastern New York, and it seems like they've kind of finally caught up, and I'm starting to see not huge populations, but I'm starting to see them quite a bit here in Western New York. So I'd say keep your eyes open, Juliana. I have a feeling they're headed your way. Is anybody else dealing with them?
Yeah, we've been seeing them in the Champlain Valley the last couple of years on my side of the lake, to the point where it gets concerning. I mean, you will go into an orchard and people will think there's some disease, leaves get all contorted. Yeah, nothing that I know anybody managing for them necessarily. But yeah, it's something more common than it used to be.
Yeah, on our side of the lake, we certainly have them too. I mean, Jen, who's on the call, she's been trapping for them, and we put them out the first week. The next week, we got 400 of them on there. And they come out early enough, they're out there tight clusters. So, pink would be a time where we might think about managing them before they curl up the leaves. But then our options are a pyrethroid, at least is what we've heard from the folks in Ontario, or possibly some of the more expensive materials. So that's certainly been a disruption for our IPM program. I think too, we're still trying to really figure out what the economic threshold might be as well. I mean, it looks pretty gnarly on the trees. We're more worried about it in the younger orchards, but on a semi-dwarf M26, it's less concerning to me. So, but certainly one that I'm getting more calls on from a lot of my growers in the Champlain Valley.
You mentioned, I think, Juliana, you mentioned something about one of your key early season pests being borers. Is that dogwood borer in apples, or are you referring more to peach borers?
Yeah, I mean, some growers are concerned about dogwood borer, but those growers are also applying mating disruption against them, like when there's a hot spot, No, I guess mostly it's stone fruit, and the borer complex in general. And there's, American plum borer, for instance, there isn't a mating disruption tool for them, and so our growers in cherry have been really concerned about the borer complex and the potential loss of chlorpyrifos altogether, because that's like really the one tool that they've relied upon for ages. And so I don't know we have people on a grant that Monique and Jaime and I are on, that where like David Shapiro Elan is like working with EPNs and trying to apply those with borers using like a gel matrix, but that's like, I don't know that that's a ready to go tool, or how expensive that is, or like the practical, we're still working on that a little bit, but yeah, we're mainly, Insecticides are we have some tools for Cicciid moths, but like for the American plum borer, there's not really a good alternative, and it's not every farm, you know. So like that, I feel like there's a lot of landscape context that that I don't know. I don't think that anyone really has looked at. Could we build like a risk map or something of like where you might be more likely to encounter certain types of pests, and or what kinds of factors are related to them, because that might help with just improving just information delivery, I guess, for the growers that would fall under those areas where, you know, like midge, if that expands, like what growers really need to be concerned about midge, what growers need to be concerned about sawfly. I don't know what all of those factors are. So some of these weird pests that have started to pop up because we're not using heavy hammers anymore, it's just like it's almost like a whole new cast of characters that we have to deal with. Yeah, and how to understand them all, and like where do you get the money to like study all of them, you know? But yeah, I think dogwood borer. I mean, I guess our thinking on that is just like it doesn't tend to kill trees, so we're not as concerned about it as we are with like the stone fruit complex. Yeah.
Did you have a comment? Leslie's iPhone, I saw you unmuted.
Well, I am a retired OMAFRA, so I don't, maybe not the most up to date. I thought Christy was coming on this call, but just listening in. But anyways, the European apple sawfly is marching westward across Ontario, and it is now west of Toronto and in the Georgian Bay area. So we're expecting it's moving about 50 to 100 kilometers a year.
Okay.
And we kind of feel the more that bins get moved around and that we'll see it a little bit earlier. So it's a treatable pest every year for orchards, Toronto and East. They would do a pre-bloom application as far as I know. And we also have lots of apple leaf curling midge, thousands. You can have them. Real problem in new trees. They're very stunt them. They stunt quite a bit in new trees, and the old trees they seem to be able to handle it.
Do you know for the apple leaf curling midge, is that a pre-bloom spray that folks are doing to manage that, or do you have any idea what that looks like?
I think a lot of them are pyrethroid still. I know I'm in southwestern Ontario, just by Lake Erie, so we have not done it because we don't have that pest yet, and we hope we don't have to do it. So it certainly affects a lot of things. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here, Leslie.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Christy was under the weather. She was supposed to be here for sure.
There was some convo in the chat about that new, I don't even know how to say this word, but I've been reading about it a lot. That new.
Planazolan.
That's what I type it.
Yeah, planazolan, and they have, I think, like a name for it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's Zilvago.
Yeah. Okay. So even
That's
like
not
that's
easier to
also
say.
bad.
Like Dr. Zilvago.
Zilvago, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's a 14-day PHI material. So, I mean, which, you know, we're not concerned about with early season applications. We have looked at it for PC. There is some data using it against PC. But let me see if I can dig up there was like actually Martine, I don't know if Martine did a update, like a summary for the Great Lakes Fruit Workers listserv. Jaime, I don't think you're on that list. You probably didn't see that, but.
No, I'm not in the list.
Yeah, so what we have as a roundup for planazolan, which is now called Zilvago, basically for codling moth, and so there were trials done for codling moth, and it works similarly to other industry standards for codling moth management. And so it will be important for resistance because it's in its own mode of action class. So, so 30 is the number, and it's just like not, so there aren't any other, no other materials in that class. In Georgia, they tested against plum curculio and stink bug in peaches, and depending on the rate, it worked as well as the standard for each of the pests evaluated. So brigade for stink bugs and imidan for plum curculio. So those compared with those two materials, it worked well.
Do you know anything about price per acre?
I don't know what the price is yet. I haven't looked that up. It was just like it's available this season for the first time. We also tried some. We also used it in codling moth and leaf roller trials at Michigan State in a program. So like leaf damage was significantly lower when it was implemented within a program that also included Ectara, Imidan, and Assail, versus Ryman, Assail, Imidan, Vertiprin, Spearlap. We had a whole bunch of different programs. I think these are things that you can look up in arthropod management tests. This was from what year? I don't even know what year, sorry. But we've tested it in apples for sure. Internal moth damage was also from OFM or codling moth was lower in all the treatment programs compared to the untreated check. So it was just like as part of a program, it worked just fine. So it definitely it looks good for like an alternative mode of action for resistance management, and I have no idea how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, thank you. That's very useful.
But the one thing is that it is not pollinator friendly, so it's not like you can spray it during bloom. Oh, and Heather added something in the comments about a PC trial she did, bagging PC around an apple. And in that scenario, it didn't hold up well, but like these are orchards with high PC pressure, and it would be, if you are struggling with PC pressure, it might not hold up on its own. It's not registered in Massachusetts. Is that what you said, Jaime?
Yeah, not yet.
Okay. Oh, and not in New York either. Well, sorry.
But we're always late to the party. Like we are always late. So we're watching what happens in Michigan. Let us know. Keep us updated.
Okay.
Yeah, you're figuring it out for all of us.
Okay, well, we'll do our best to tell you how it goes. Yeah.
So it seems like if we like sort of start to wrap up this very sort of meandering conversation, we still have 15 minutes, so we're not have to wrap it up majorly yet, but just to kind of start to wrap it up, it seems like sometimes the pink spray is necessary, sometimes it's not. One of the problems is that we don't know often whether we need it until it's too late, right? So maybe one question would be trying to find funding, which is always a problem, and then do some sort of helping growers to predict, like you were saying, Juliana, about knowing which farms might be more likely to have problems with sawfly or more likely to have problems with apple leaf curling midge. And maybe similarly, if we had any way to know ahead of time which years might be bad years for, predicting the weather more than 2 days ahead is impossible. But if we knew that it was likely to be a cool spring, being able to give any sort of guidance. So, I don't know how we're going to do that, but that would be sort of my takeaway from this conversation. Kathleen has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to make an additional comment about curculio because it's something I don't sort of hear people talk about that I've always relied on is that Ron Prokopi always said that they really do not attack fruit until it gets to about 6 millimeters, which means when the fruit really sort of sets is when they start to go after it. They're not attracted to the blossoms or, even sort of new petal fall. So it gives us kind of a minute, admittedly not much, but, a little time at petal fall. And what I've kind of leaned toward doing now is because, our growers most of our orchards are so small and have such a mix up of different varieties that, we get these situations where you can't get at your early varieties because, the other varieties are still in bloom. And, so my suggestion has been spot treat those varieties, spot treat those, the ginger golds and the early varieties, the liberties, if people still have them, things like that. Get those covered pre-bloom, and then maybe that gives you a little breather at Petal-Fall. So I just wanted to throw that 6 millimeter thing out because it seemed like a pretty reliable indicator from my general experience, and might be helpful to put in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm. So you would think of it as like a solidly petal fall, maybe even pushing first cover, or is that a little risky pest?
It's surprising how fast it does happen, because it's a kind of sudden, when I really started watching for it, it's like all of a sudden. And I think people used to complain that Liberty always seemed to get hit first. And Ron always said there's no actual varietal preference, but somehow Liberty just seems to size up like really rapidly. So it sets and it just goes boom, and it just becomes a very attractive variety. So yeah, it's I think it's in a typical year, I think it's a matter of probably days as opposed to um, you know, like going all the way to a first cover spray. And then the other aspect of that, and I just don't know, I know Dwayne Green has really got everybody on this carbaryl at Petal-Fall program for thinning. And that's been a big help with managing curculio because it kind of suppresses curculio at that timing. And I don't know how widespread that practice is outside of our area.
Any feedback or follow-up questions from any of that? Or whole new directions of conversation?
I've got a show and tell I can show
Please,
and tell about.
let's do it.
So this came from a grower that I work with here in the Champlain Valley, and I'm going back to 2021. So this is probably actually a stupid question, but I'm not a bug guy, so please be kind. So stupid question. What am I looking at here? We had a roundabout conversation with a couple of colleagues, but I'm curious to hear what you would think this damage is, and maybe we start there.
I will say tarnished plant bug
Or mullen plant bug.
or mullein, yeah. That's hard to tell.
Okay. So probably he didn't do a pink application this year. Would that have helped with this? Because he said it was pretty extensive in a lot of his varieties.
Is it a weedy orchard? Should we loop back to that?
No, he does a pretty good job of managing it, I think, but you can always improve.
Well,
All right,
the only
so
other thing I might add to that is if it's not weedy, if he mows at certain timings, that's going to kick him up into the trees. So it's like I don't remember what the best, like, disturbing them is when makes them likely to jump up into the tree and start to feed on the tree. So I'm like trying to remember the references about that in particular, but one way to prevent damage, like, just because in peach orchards in particular, like, or if a neighbor cuts his hay, yeah, so there's like different things that can trigger their movement into the orchard or into the trees. And so mowing is actually a disturbance that causes them to move. So I don't know if there was a timing issue with something like that, or a neighbor with hay that they cut, but that's one thing to consider.
okay, yeah, I can check in with him on that. I think for this was kind of the perfect storm where they weren't getting a lot in their insect traps because it was a pretty cool pink, so they elected not to do a pink spray. And then because of that, we were at bloom for like 2 weeks. So, whatever was there had plenty of time to hang out and do their thing before they got their Petal-Fall on. So just kind of that perfect storm situation. All right, thanks.
Yeah, Martine added a little note about rosy apple aphids, and I agree with him. I think where rosy apple aphids can be, um, they don't. Well, he doesn't think they can be controlled with natural enemies. At least you wouldn't expect there to be much. There's not a lot of time for mummies to form, for instance. But there would be predators, I would think. But there's like this. The threshold is pretty low. The standard threshold for application. I don't know if Martine wants to. At least woolly apple aphids, because they're around for so much longer, there's like opportunities for natural enemies to really help with suppressing the populations. The rosies is just like they kind of build up really fast and then they crash, for
Well, so
whatever
here's my
reason.
stupid question in response to that,
Yeah.
showing how much I don't know about rosy apple aphids, but wouldn't that in some ways provide more of an opportunity for natural enemy suppression because they're outside of the apple spray environment for part of their life cycle where they maybe could be uh you know managed by natural enemies, or is that not? I don't know if you can then use that as a tool per se, but it seems like it might be sort of an accidental advantage for us, maybe, or no?
I mean, rosies. So if it's they tend to okay. So if it's not good weather for natural enemies, then you tend to get lots of rosies or aphids in general. So if you're spraying, and I'm gonna mix it up because my brain is like I'm not functioning on all cylinders. I had some sleep issues last night, but anyway, what I'm thinking, but there are some weather related things that can help with, if it's gonna be a riskier year for aphids or not, just due to like conditions in spring. If it's too cold, I think if it was like a cold, wet spring, I think that was not favorable for natural enemies. Anyway, there's a
Gotcha.
We
question about, yeah, go ahead, Jaime.
we have had some issues with Rosy apple aphid, but mostly in Cortland, Macintosh, Jonathan, some cultivars.
Sure.
Then, if the trees are young, I think there is a risk that the fruit may be affected
Yeah, I mean
because
it's gonna affect fruiting wood. It can do some damage on apples if it's really really bad, but because they get on like flowers and like it just distorts things. But
and we have seen some parasitism, but it's not very high
yeah,
with the
no,
Rosy apple aphid.
I would think it would be like some predators that eat soft-bodied insects would be the most important thing for rosies. Um,
At some point in June, you will see them gone, not because they were killed, but they just go to a different host.
oh
But
yeah,
the growers in general, they're not concerned about Rosia polyphid, even though they see the pest, unless the trees are young. That's the main concern.
yeah. I don't know if Monique is answering this question about woolies. We think they can complete they're spending their entire lives on apples in Michigan as well. Well, there aren't that many elm trees left for them to move to, for that sexual stage. And we do see alates in orchards. So it suggests that they are able. I mean, we know they're able to complete their life cycle on apples in like Australia, where they don't have elms at all. So, um, but yeah, they can do that. Bronte as a soil application against woolly apple aphids and apple roots. I've never actually seen woolly apple aphids on roots in real life. I like
Yeah, me either. I haven't seen
I
them.
mean it's so I don't know. I'm like we're yeah. Yeah, soil type will matter, you know. I have not tested Bronte as a soil application for controlling anything, so it's a good question.
Is that a problem that you're seeing frequently, Caitlin, is woolies on the roots? I would agree. I've seen woolies on roots once in a lab environment where they were specifically using a highly susceptible root and sticking woolies directly onto it. But it's not something that I've seen in the
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't actually seen it. I was just under the impression that that was where they were overwintering. So I have a follow-up question of where are they actually overwintering then? I did have a grower this year ask if there was anything he could do at this timing to control them, but I was assuming that because I thought they were in the ground that he couldn't. And that was what made me think of the Bronte as a soil application.
Right. Well, we know they're able to overwinter above ground here in Michigan. We find live colonies in when we go out to collect them in February, March. But where they are is in pruning cuts and just crevices like on the tree. But like they like to hang out in pruning cuts for sure from like last season. And they're able to survive the winter above ground.
If they can survive the winter in New York and Michigan, for sure they are surviving the winter in New Jersey. So
Absolutely.
I would, we start scouting for them probably around the last week of March to see what's going on above ground. But the key biological factor to remember is they're not starting to become active until you see that white mass. That means that they're actively feeding, but we see them without the white above ground. I think they're staying up there all year long, and especially if they've created any what I'm calling above ground galling, where you see the bark split and you will see this sort of lumpy surface underneath. We know they like to be in that area alongside with the pruning cuts, as Juliana mentioned. So that would be, if you have hot spots where you see a lot of that, that would be the first place to check.
I don't know if you can find this quickly, Monique, but you had a great picture of that for the presentation that you gave me, my growers, last week. Could you pull that up now or send it to the group later?
Yeah, I can pull it up right now if you give me just a sec.
Perfect. While Monique's doing that, we have about 2 minutes left technically for this conversation. So if you guys want to chuck any last questions in. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
So this is essentially what we see, and I'll like zoom in for effect, but let's first talk about how this is actually the split of the bark. You can see that here, this sort of V shape there. And the red circle, so this red circle, the nice thing about giving this online is that we can play around with what we're looking at. So this specific red circle, this is what they would look like above ground before they start to produce white. And the idea here is that they're kind of just laying and waiting. So when we take these branches and bring them into favorable conditions in the lab, we will see that white to start forming really, really quickly. Now, if we go down here to the other red circle, this is something I know you've probably seen, and that is basically the mummies. So Aphelinus malai is tightly associated with them. They're parasitoid. They lay their egg inside of the woolly and develop inside the woolly. I think they preferentially lay, in third instar, and then develop, and then they pupate in these carcasses. So I'm not sure if this is true, but there's been lore about it. Maybe someone else can chime in. That this is also serves as sort of a vehicle for overwintering. They can pupate inside here and stay inside that carcass. Anyone else who has any information about that? That's something I think my grad student is maybe going to look at a little bit. So, being careful in your management of what you have of these carcasses above ground too, since that's a symbol that you could have natural enemies hanging out there over the winter, trying to make it to the next season to cycle with the woolly apple aphid.
Perfect. Thank you. And then if, I guess you guys can't see my mouse because I'm not presenting, but kind of in the middle or more over to the left, that sort of like, to me, it almost looks like scab or something. Is that what you would say is caused by the feeding? It's sort of like a side effect type thing.
So you mean like this lump here in the middle?
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
that
so that's
like
basically what I'm
galling?
calling above ground. Yeah, that's what I'm calling above ground galling. So it's basically like they're here, the bark is splitting, and their feeding is causing the plant material to proliferate to cause like almost like a gall-like substance. And one thing that my graduate student has found is that they do like to feed on those areas, and they will kind of start colonies in those areas.
I have another photo of that kind of thing exactly if you want to.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Yeah. So this is I've got like, where is it? What is it doing? Can you see this right here? This picture here. I'm trying to make it bigger.
Yeah,
So this, yeah, let me zoom in. Yeah. This is so this is like what she was just talking about. You can see this gall bulging down from a split. And so this is all split wood or bark because of feeding. All of these are a lot of these are mummified aphids, but like this is like what we see in a very heavily infested. They love Fuji, by the way, too. So we find woolies on Fuji all the time. This is a really old photo of galling on roots. I have like literally never. I said it was a very old photo to a group of growers. You know, like an ancient photo, I said, from the 1960s, and they were like laughing at me because they're like, we were born in the 60s, you know? So it was just funny. But like this is one other slide is just like, so we can find them on the trunk in early spring, the pruning cuts, then on branches, and then also on new growth, although there's some, you know, rosies in there too in that photo. But like this is what Martine has been looking at, is just like their phenology, where they are through time, and they're just like above ground the entire from May to October, but just maybe in different, hanging out in different places. So yeah, but the galling, the above ground galling stuff is just pretty common when it's severe. So that's all.
cool. Thank you. Well, we are after 1 o'clock. I don't want to force folks to stay on longer. I see a few people have already gotten off, but this has been such a helpful conversation for me. So I do want to really say thank you, Juliana and Monique, and everybody else who has contributed in any way. I'm happy to stay on and continue the conversation, but I also want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Take care.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for those pictures at the end too. That graph that you just showed, Juliana, if she's still here, maybe she left. That was really good.
I think she's gone.
Shoot, I'm gonna have to email her and ask her to share it. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good week.
Thanks and take care.
We'll see you in 2 weeks, is it, Mike?
2 weeks, yep.
Yeah.
We'll talk about thinning.
2 weeks to talk about thinning. Thanks, everyone. Bye, y'all.
Bye, Mike.
Bye.